Hello, learning nerds. Welcome on in to another podcast episode. I'm your host. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson, and I am your guide along your instructional design journey. I'm a senior instructional designer and program manager, a lecturer, an author, a blogger, a podcaster, and I make a lot of content on the internet talking all about instructional design and designing learning experiences. You can find all of the information about this show and plenty more resources to help you along your journey over at drlukehobson.com. Two special announcements before we begin today's episode. The first is that I need your help. I am throwing out the learning nerd bat signal, if you will, because I am looking for your feedback. I had an idea a couple of weeks ago, and I realized actually, but there was a bit of a problem in that I have been producing content online for the last 5 years or so. And because of that, my content is basically everywhere. Every article, blog, podcast, YouTube video, the millions, it feels like millions at this point in time, clearly exaggerated, of workshops and events and conferences. There's just so much information I have out there, and I've realized there's a bit of a problem of trying to be able to locate everything and put it all in one convenient space for you. So I realized this. And I thought to myself, hypothetically speaking, if I could create some type of instructional design library or database or catalog, or just basically putting together everything I have for you somewhere online, would people be interested? I've been talking about this with a bunch of you on Facebook and LinkedIn and email, and it seems like yes, that you would like something to be able to have a repository, if you will, of all of these resources so that way you can go and learn about whatever it is. And that's actually the major thing as far as for why I want your feedback. I put together a survey asking you about what do you want to be able to learn about, talking about from instructional design fundamentals, learning strategies, AI, portfolios, how to find a job, accessibility, project management. What exactly can I help you with? And then I'm going to gather all the information, every topic I have under the sun, put it together, and of course, create some new things as well, and try to put this all inside of one location. And of course, there has to be a community element to it as well. I heard that from all of you right from the start. You want to be able to connect with other like-minded individuals, other instructional designers, soon to be instructional designers. You want to be able to talk shop, talk more about with networking and different types of adventures and ideas and everything else you have pertaining within the instructional design space. So of course, that has to be included inside of this as well. So I'm going to be bringing together for you a type of a database, community, putting that all together, and then offering that. So I'm working on this in real time, like right now. If you go to LinkedIn, you can actually see the latest post I made that was showing you a snapshot of a prototype of what I'm currently working on. And this really did portray exactly the problem. I'm realizing, all right, I just have so much stuff everywhere, where I started to build out a model on Addy from some of the articles and videos that I had. And then all of a sudden I was just like, wait a minute, with Addy, I also have my interview with William Crenier talking about how does Addy actually fit into with different forms of jobs and tasks and things like that. But then also we have a whole bunch of different forms of interviews we're talking about with Addy, because I've talked with Tim McKean over at ASU about the Addy process. And also I've talked with Shreya Gupta when we were talking about a day in the life of a learning experience designer at Amazon, and she also brought up Addy. So when all of a sudden it was just like, wait a minute, it's not just some of the videos and the articles, there's all these other different things. And of course, I'm going to be able to include different forms of activities and other things as well. So this is going to become something that I very much want to be able to see to help you, whether you are feeling stuck or going on inside of your current job or soon to be job. So hence, putting this together. Love your feedback. Please go into the show notes and fill out that survey today. And the other special announcement is that the next cohort for Instructional Design Institute, our 7-week-long instructional design bootcamp to be able to teach you about everything for designing meaningful learning experiences, that is going to be launching in a couple of weeks. It's going to be launching again on August 28th. So if you'd love to be able to learn more from other learning nerds and of course from myself to get my coaching and my feedback as well, and obviously being able to build out and to design your own learning experience, which is the whole purpose and point of the course. There are many of you who have not had the opportunity yet to be able to do so, or you want to do something completely different as far as for learning about this process, and whether you want to be able to take this information back to your organization or you want to be able to use this as an opportunity to be able to enhance your portfolio or anything else, we go through so much within 7 weeks. And 7 weeks goes by like that, by the way. It is so fast. So anyway, that begins August 28th. Once again, be sure, go down to the show notes, apply today for Instructional Design Institute. If all looks well, you will be hearing from me. I'll be reaching out to you as far as with next steps. And hey, I hope to see you there. With all of that being said, let's talk about today's amazing guest. Today, we are going to be talking with Luis Malbas, and you probably know him online as the founder of TLDC. If you don't know what TLDC is, by the way, it is an incredible organization, but it's really founded first and foremost on community, and also really going into very pertinent and timely topics about instructional design, learning and development, learning experience design, professional development, and everything else of the sort. I've also known Luis for years, and he invited me on to do a webinar one day to be able to talk about, I believe it was a webinar for helping teachers to transition to become instructional designers. And right away, as soon as I joined and I was talking with him, I was like, this is different. Like this community, this vibe, the presence, it just felt different. It felt so welcoming, and it was an amazing time. I loved being able to be a part of it and to talk more with his community. And I recently reached out to him and asked him about, hey, could you come on the podcast? Because clearly you designed something amazing, and I would love for you to kind of explain more about everything with the community. How did you build it? He's also a one-person show, by the way. He does everything himself, which is mind-boggling of how much he does, how many people he brings on in, his networks, the connections, everything of his sort. It really is absolutely incredible to see what he has built. So I asked him more about how to design our own types of online learning communities. And also, he has a background within the event and conference space. So we talked about events and conferences, where many events and conferences are finally opening up for the first time, or they're rolling out again. So that is something else I wanted to ask him more about too, because I've had some kind of awkward and weird conference experiences before in the past. I thought they were going to be awesome, and then I showed up and was just like, oh, it's okay. And I was like, I feel like I need to learn more about how do I properly go about attending a conference? What do you do to make it meaningful? How can I get the most out of this? So I asked them a whole bunch of questions about that, and also a lot of questions too about topics that we should be talking about more today with DEI, accessibility, and everything else of the sort. We get into all of these amazing types of words of wisdom from Luis, and it was an awesome and a type of an incredible conversation. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Here is the one and the only Luis Malbas.
Thanks, Luke. It's great to talk to you.
Absolutely, man. Likewise. I can't wait to dive on into this. But before I get ahead of myself, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Absolutely. My name is Luis Malbas. I am the founder and pretty much the dude who runs the training, learning, and development community, or at least oversees it, because I really do believe that a lot of the community helps make things happen for TLDC. But that's me. I also am, I work on the marketing team at O'Reilly Media, so I do that as well. And let's see what else. I'm a musician, I am a husband and a dad, and hang out at home, play lots of D&D, and pretend to know how to play Magic the Gathering with my son. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Hey, a fellow nerd who also likes music. I mean, just like we're on the right podcast together, man. This is as we go into the full-blown nerd podcast of 2023. But I got to ask you, because I've known you now for a couple of years. And one of the things when I was thinking about questions to ask you is that I realized I don't know about your origin story. How did you get into learning and development and instructional design and all of that?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I don't really talk about it much, but I think it's a very cool story. So let's see. I actually have a formal IT background. I went to school and did technical work for the first part of my career, and got really burnt out at a manufacturing company, and sort of took a break, and then saw an ad in a newspaper way back when, for a place called the E-Learning Guild that happened to be a block away from my house. And I thought, let's see. I have a tech background. I kind of want to get into that. I've always loved learning. I've always loved education. This thing is a block away, so I could walk there. So let me fax over my resume and see what happens. And so at the time, like 3 months later, I was actually working at a school doing IT support. At that time, then I got a phone call from Mr. David Holcomb, who was the founder and CEO of the e-learning guild, and asked me to come in for an interview. And I just loved the situation so much. He was in a tiny like shoebox office, like where you could fit 2 desks and a printer and a server, and that's pretty much it. And I went in. It seemed like just an ideal situation for me at the time. The pay was absolutely terrible. It was like maybe a quarter of what I was normally used to making, but it was a startup, and I signed up, and it was great. I love the idea of event production. I love the idea of e-learning, all of that. Although my background was all purely IT and technical at the time, I really got in there and hit everything hard. So I ended up working there for about 11 years, and I started out as an administrative assistant because that's all he needed at the time. But then when I left, I was the COO, and we'd gone from producing conferences that had 100 people for our first one, maybe in San Francisco, to over 3,000 when I left in 2015, I think it was. The last one I did was at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, and that was amazing. But then my wife and I had our son, and part of the reason I left was because I really wanted to focus on fatherhood, and I had been there for a while and just needed to grow in a different way.
Can you imagine about going to a conference with 3,000 instructional designy people? Like, that's just mind blowing to me. Yeah. Where, for the longest time, you talk to somebody and they're like, "Who are you? What do you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's a well-kept secret that no one knows who we are." And to think that 3,000 people could gather together to learn from one another is like insane.
Yeah. No, it's I love those events. I love doing that stuff. I have different ideas about producing live events now, but it was really. It's one of the reasons why I had to stay in L&D was because I loved the culture of it. I loved the people that I got to talk to, and I'm sure you know that L&D folks, instructional designers, are kind of just generous and are into sharing, just by default. And so I always felt very, very comfortable in this particular industry. And that's why I'm trying to give back with TLDC.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And that's usually the number one thing I hear from people coming into the field for the first time. They're surprised. They're like, everyone seems so nice. Like, yeah, this is actually genuine. Most 99.99% of everybody over here in this L&D space are great, wonderful human beings. Like, they really are. So it makes a lot of sense. I'd love to dive a little bit more into if you're talking about from this entire type of event planning, the conferences, everything like that, because I read one of your articles that was titled with Meeting Up at DevLearn 2022. And I felt like I was kind of stepping back in time there because you shared some original photos where you even showed like original guitar and like the wallpaper and all the stuff from the hotel back in 2005, I think is when you uploaded those pictures, which was crazy. Yeah. What was it like back then to attend a conference, and then now comparing it to what we have for 2023? Can you do a bit of like comparison and contrastion for us about that?
Oh, definitely. One of the big things for me that stood out, and maybe because I handled a lot of the technical stuff, was Wi-Fi and smartphones.
Yeah.
In 2005, that just wasn't there. And there were things that we wanted to do that, if we wanted to connect people to the internet back then, we had to have wired computers, and we did. We actually had an email network, and I would set up that email network, and people would use this, group of 8 laptops to check their email in between sessions and do all of that. So that was pretty crazy. Vendors were different too, I think. The expo, well, for one, a lot smaller, but you didn't have large screen TVs. Things were still being distributed purely by brochure, by paper. And, And I don't think anybody was scanning anything back then. So it was business card transactions. So it was definitely different. It was definitely different. And the smaller events too, I just remember we would go fancy and everything was plated. From the food and beverage side of things, it just felt more, it was kind of more luxurious, and I think that the connections you made tended to be more, you had to do face-to-face stuff. You really had to connect you had to network like analog, and it's not as much like that now. Everyone sort of has you have these digital relationships that you start online, and then conferences are now a way to kind of meet those folks that you met online and gather that way. But at events, pretty much everybody is a stranger, and you just have to you had to work at a completely different way.
At the last conference that I went to, someone handed me a business card. I didn't know what to do with it.
Wait.
And I'm like, oh, that's right. Business cards are a thing. Like, yes, can you add me on LinkedIn? Like, I gave the gentleman my name, and I was like, wow, I feel so silly. But it never dawned upon me he's been to many conferences, and that's what he's always done. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. But here I am in this digital native age as a millennial, where I'm like, add me on LinkedIn. Let's connect that way. It's not I'm like, I'm sure enough the card is somewhere that way in this desk with all the other cards that I gathered from that day. I'm like, just trying to figure this out. But you actually mentioned something in that article that really spoke to me and I wanted to touch upon, and you described it, and I'm looking at my notes here because I wanted to make sure I definitely got this down from using quotes, is that you mentioned that people who were at the conferences is that there were some who were the lone conference attender.
Right.
And that was me. I remember the first conference that I went by myself. I didn't know anybody, and I was not the way that I am today. Now I'm like very loud and eccentric and whatever. But back in like 2013, that my personality is a bit different there. I felt so awkward. And it was really weird feeling like I was alone in a crowded room.
Yeah.
Didn't like that. I was like, oh, I don't. So conferences at first kind of got me, rubbed the wrong way until I finally met someone who was there, but I recognized and was just like, oh, thank God. And then it became a good experience. But I know for some people, I was actually reading this on LinkedIn about some of the other different physical conferences that people were going to, and they had the exact same experience that I did, but unfortunately now in 2023. So for those who are thinking about going to a conference for the first time, how do they get the most out of it? How do they get like an enjoyable experience and not be like me with trying to be a wallflower and hope someone recognizes you? What do you do?
Right. I think with L&D in particular, just dive in and start chatting with people, especially if you're going to a session where, where the topic is something that you might know a little bit more about, and, there isn't, don't have a problem at all with like turning to a person sitting near you and just chatting them up, introducing yourself. It really is that simple. I can tell you way back when, I know when in the early days of the guild, when we were doing events, I personally used to like see kind of the lone conference attendees that would sort of hang out by the registration desk, kind of trying to figure out what to do. And it was easy for me just to walk up to them and saying, hey, what's up? Do you need help finding something? And then just getting to talk to them. And I can't recall anybody specific, but I know there were many times that, once you introduce yourself and start talking to these attendees, you can figure out a way to kind of, for me anyway, I would connect them to other people. And so I would suggest, if you're somebody at a conference and you're trying to like, oh, I feel so uncomfortable, maybe look for a staff or somebody that you can talk to, and then start from there. Because believe me, as somebody who worked those events, meeting new people is actually really, really cool. That's a whole part of the experience for us, working them. Might be a little difference now because, when they, working at the guild and at ATD events, they bring in, workers that have no clue about the event really. They're just there to do, the check-in and check-out kind of, maintenance of rooms and stuff. So maybe those might not be so good. But if you're working like, for instance, if you go to a guild event, look for the people with the guild shirts and see if you can spark a conversation with them, because more than likely they'll be able to kind of integrate you into whatever group. I know that's something I was able to do. And so I totally suggest that. And then usually conferences always have some kind of networking function or whatever that you can participate in. And at the large events, there are an endless number of vendors from the expo that also host these types of events, because of course they want to sell you their product, but those work too, so you can find good networking opportunities, for sure.
Yeah, all these are awesome. I never even thought about asking one of the attendees. Never crossed my mind to try to talk to someone who actually works there. That makes a lot of sense. But to what you just said, though, for the very last point, there's been some vendors who I have talked to that started a connection. Yes, clearly they want me to buy their thing or to enroll in their whatever. But there's been plenty of times where it's just like, no, you get to meet that individual, and then sure, down the line, maybe you can work together with something. But I've made plenty of friendships that way. Yeah,
absolutely. And contrary to what a lot of people out there might think, because everyone has this sort of natural, or maybe not natural, but they might have this bias against vendors that they're just trying to sell. But no, a lot of these folks are absolute experts and know their stuff. The reason why they may have built the product that they built was because they're passionate about this space, and they wanted to create a solution that could help other people, and also make money, of course. But that's if you end up like hooking up with them and chatting with them, more than likely you can learn a ton from them. You don't necessarily have to buy stuff from them, but I highly recommend that. I hear others, that say, stay away from the expo, stay away from vendors. And I totally disagree with that. I think that those are some of the best relationships that you can form.
Absolutely. And you never know. You might be working for them in the future.
Exactly.
You never know. So you can't really just like disparage all of them. Like, I know that makes sense. Well, awesome. So, hey, let's talk about the reason for why you are actually here. You mentioned about it a little bit, but definitely want to shine some more light on the training, learning, and development community, or as we all just call it, TLDC. Mm-hmm. Where did the idea for TLDC come from?
Great. Yeah, that's, I think it was 2016, after I had left the guild. I was just sort of trying to figure out what to do, thought about maybe doing some consulting work, but I had still maintained contact with a couple of former colleagues, two in particular, Patty Shank and Brent Schlenker. I worked with both of them. Patty used to be the director of research at the Guild, and Brent was like the program manager at one time. And so we had messaged, they found out, that I had left, and we just started talking, and we're like, well, what if we started, actually it didn't start out as a community. The idea was to actually throw or put together smaller events, because the thing that we really, really loved about these events was just, connecting and hanging out with other like-minded folks, and it was harder to do that, or harder to get that experience when you have, like, say, a 3,000 person event. But if you had something that was 100 people or 200 people, you can kind of distill that, and all of a sudden you just get these really incredible connections that can last you a lifetime. So we thought, what if we did something where we just started putting together our own events? They don't have to be huge. They just need to be this size. And so I had some money saved up, and although Patty had left to do other things, Brent and I started TLDC and built out a conference that we hosted in San Diego in 2016, and it was absolutely incredible. One of the best events I'd ever been to, and I helped produce it. So it was absolutely fantastic. It was really expensive. I lost a ton of money, but I'll never forget the experience. It was really, really great. And from there, just started to change things up, started changing up how I wanted the event to be produced. We started using a different venue type, started shifting around. But the key part of it was throwing smaller events and really focusing on helping the L&D professionals that showed up make connections. That was the big thing for us. And we didn't want it to be a thing where you had 1 hour blocks with 10 sessions in each block. That was like tough to like throw at people, or the idea of it. So we did smaller events where you might have a block with 2 sessions and you just had to choose one or the other. And it worked out really, really well. We ended up doing a few more conferences. All of them were in Phoenix at a workspace place, and they were really incredible. A lot of fun, but we stopped when COVID came around.
Yes, of course. That really did change everything from a conference perspective. Of course, now everything is going to be, and that whole transition into what does a remote conference actually look like, or like a well done conference? Because there's plenty of conferences. Don't get me wrong. Before then, but it was always like, they're okay. And then it was much like emergency learning. I kind of felt like there was a bit of an emergency conferencing where all of a sudden you're like, okay, I guess I'm here. Kind of Zoom's not working. Where's the person? I don't know what's happening. And it's, it was strange. But for you and for TLDC, I want to make sure that I really do touch upon this, is that you have a legit community. And this is the one thing that, like, in my notes is always this like underlying bold, make sure I stick this out with 72-point fonts, because I was so impressed when, luckily for you, thank you again, you invited me to go into TLDC and speak as a part of a series of folks who are trying to be able to help out teachers transition to become instructional designers. And what I remember was that as I was presenting, the chat was exploding and people were commenting on one another's stuff, answering questions, giving answers. They were going through, it was just insane. It was the most lively, engaging session, one of the most engaging sessions I've ever had. And
you were incredible. You were really, really good, Luke.
Well, 7 Red Bulls will really get there. It's just, no, as always, as you know, I like to really be able to just give as much as I can. If you're giving me your time, I'll give you the very best of mine. But it just really showed to me about how what you had was special. And some people say that they have a community around their events and their products, and you're like, but is it a community? I'm like, no, it's like no one's really talking, no one's really engaged, kind of a thing. But you do. How did you foster this kind of community? Because it's different. So how did you do it?
Yeah. A lot of it was trial and error. I think, honestly, the community was started initially to try to build an audience for the conferences, right? And then once the conferences were gone, I kind of had to really rethink the way that I looked at all of it. And when it came down to it, my priorities just simply had to change. And maybe COVID had something to do with that too. There were a lot of things that I learned at the e-learning guild, or the learning guild now, that were really incredible. And more than I learned, like, here's a way to make a lot of money, with building conferences, because they've been very, very, very successful with that. But I actually had to unlearn all of that when I started building TLDC, because my focus had to be on just these individuals that were coming around that were really wanting help, needed help with their professional development. And I needed to find just solutions for them, not so much solutions for me and solutions to generate revenue. And so I kind of, the revenue generation part of it, I didn't prioritize it at all. I ended up like, how much impact can we have? And the first thing was just making the community as inclusive as possible, which meant like just basically making sure that our audience would accept everybody. And one of the things that I really switched around was, initially when we had first started producing events, who I think that we tended to, or like Brent and I back then, tended to sort of to surround ourselves with were a lot of, I would say, dudes, right? But then I knew this audience. I'm like, wait a minute, it's not just dudes. We've got there are so many incredible, innovative women in this space that need their voices to be heard. And so I really kind of switched things around and focused on finding ways to highlight some of the women in L&D and make sure that they were getting kind of the spotlight that they deserve. And that really, really helped a lot. And then also as a person of color, I wanted to make sure that, that the program that we were creating was also including other people of color, because I didn't see that a lot in other places, and that was important to me. And so I do think that we've managed to foster a community where everybody feels welcome coming in, and it's been successful in that way. A lot of the topics I think might not be everybody's bag, right? Like some of the things that we do probably feel a little more on the social justice side. We have, we've done multiple DEI events. We've continually done the Women of L&D events, and now we have the Accessibility and Inclusion event. I do love doing those types of events because they're not typical, and I think that they're really, really just important parts of L&D and parts of things that I think instructional designers should prioritize are, those particular topics. And it's been, at first I felt like maybe some of this is a little risky, like taking these stuff on. It's not something that I knew I would make any money on, but then that wasn't the point. The point was really like, is this going to help people? And so it's been successful in that way. If you ask my wife, she would say, like from a revenue perspective, whenever we have to like cut a check for whatever bills we need to pay, she's like, Luis, what are you doing? But that's not important to me. What's important is making sure that we exist here. And I'm wanting it also to drive other organizations, to force them to have to think about some of the things that we're doing and take them on too, some of the larger organizations. And that has actually been the case. I have had other speakers say to me, this large media organization has contacted me wondering how can we produce a similar event to what you did at TLDC. And then also how much do you think people would pay to go to this event? But that's not going to be the case ever with me. It's going, but I have to run lean, and I have to, and it's just me. I can't really hire anybody because I'm not making any money with this, but I just have to figure out ways and systems and tools that'll help me continue to maintain and continue to build TLDC so that people will continue to benefit from it as long as I'm doing it.
Yeah, and well, I definitely hope that you find additional ways for revenue and monetization, because what you're doing is so important. And when I was seeing how you would post different types of events, just the traction that you would get, like when you mentioned about the women of L&D, most folks within the L&D are women. So obviously they need a voice. They need this type of a platform. And I know that from speaking from the perspective of being a white male living in New England who's 35. So I'm in that perfect demographic right there. But there's a lot of people like me who talk about a whole bunch of stuff. But is the majority of folks out there me? No, not it should not be. It should be other types of representation. So going back to what you said too, it really is thinking about it as far as we talk about learning, we talk about development too. I just don't think about it from like a professional development perspective. I think about it more from like the human development side of just growing as a human being to say, yes, this is important. Let's talk more about this, or why aren't we talking about this a bit more? So every time you have an event that gives more voice and representation, I'm always just like, this is brilliant. It's like, why aren't people doing this more, kind of a thing. So it's shocking to me. But you do have the Accessible and Inclusive Design Conference in 2023 that is happening August 14th to August 18th. Tell me more about that, about what they can expect, what's going to be coming out from that coming out pretty soon.
Yeah. So that's just in a few weeks. It's kind of our big summer event. It's running a little late this summer, but I'm glad that we're finally getting it going. It was like for TLDC, it was one of the first like big events that we ever produced. I think the first time we produced it, we had something like 1,500 registrants, and it was incredible. And then I heard afterwards that there were multiple, colleges and universities that were actually sharing the resources for the event, the recordings for the event, because it was just such a great curated collection of speakers with excellent topics. This particular event was kind of the brainchild of Kayleen Holt of Scissortail Creative Services. I think the way that it worked, was maybe I'd wanted to put this thing together and ask for help, and then she sort of reached out and really helped take it to the next level. But yeah, I think this event is just it. We already have a nice selection of speakers for it. A lot of the folks that are part of the TLDC community are already accessibility and inclusion advocates. It's if you're somebody in instructional design that cares at all about accessibility and inclusion, you should, and that should be everyone.
Yes,
you should attend the event, I hope. And I just, I did announce it in the newsletter today, and I just checked real quick and immediately saw a bunch of people already registering.
Good.
So I think it'll be an excellent event, and it's typical of, the TLDC type, event style where, the audience is just as important as the speaker. I love it because a lot of times, just the chat can be a huge resource for folks as well, and since inclusion is such a huge part of what we do, everybody is welcome to attend. So I hope we'll see you there. You can go to theaidc.com, and that will take you to the website.
Awesome. Oh yeah, for sure. We'll include them in show notes and everything too, so people can find it. But I was even thinking about this today because for my own types of courses, and I'm working on this new project, I'm searching for a new learning platform, and I instantly ruled out a bunch because of accessibility. Yeah. That it was not, like the fact that in 2023 I have no option of being able to have closed captions inside of a video on a learning platform is bonkers. Right. Yeah. I'm like, what? It's like that's the first thing you learn about is like you need that, and then the transcript, and it's insane, and it goes much beyond that, obviously. But I can't believe we're still dealing with this. So hey, here's hoping that people attend your conference, especially those people who run learning platforms. Get with the program. Come on now. But absolutely, I hope folks will learn more. Obviously, go down to the show notes. You can find out a little bit more about that one. We talked about community. This one's going to be an awesome builder as well too. I did want to ask you, what was one thing that's either overlooked or not talked about at all pertaining with building communities?
I think that a lot of when I had started community building, I had seen, primarily that the positive thing about having a community was the marketing potential of it. And I work as a marketer, that's how I make my make my money. Day to day, but I understand that perspective and how you can gather email addresses and then you could sell your products to people and do all of that, but I don't really feel like that is not the type of community that I'm interested in building. The type of community that I think that I want to focus on is really the type of community where people legitimately connect with one another, and I know that happens regularly with TLDC because I see it. I see it in our Slack channels. I see it online and in our in the events that we produce on a regular basis. But I when I was building the community, I didn't see anything about authenticity. I didn't see anything about empathy. I didn't see anything like that. It was more about, do this, you can automate this, you can message people on a regular basis to do this, just all of these different types of ways to structure a community from a marketing perspective. But, the actual community, like, even your local community, like having here in our neighborhood, here in this small city that I live in, building TLDC has helped me actually function as an active community member just here in this little Northern California town that I live in, because I'm now I understand like the importance of connecting with others around you and helping to make a difference, and that happens regularly in TLDC. And it's not, like I said earlier, it might not be for everybody, but I do think that most of the active members really do enjoy what they see. And it is a different flavor than a lot of what's out there.
Absolutely. It is 100% different. I can attest. And yeah, it's not going to be for everybody. Don't get me wrong. Nothing is for everybody. There are no absolutes in this world. But I think for the majority of people, once again, the 99.99%, I feel like they would absolutely fall in love with what you have going on and for all the other future things. Absolutely. Absolutely. Last question for you, and then I'll let you get on out of here. And this is a bit of a selfish question because I am also a one-man show. You are a one-man show. What is keeping you with trying to be able to keep on doing this? And do you have any words of wisdom to share with people who are one-person types of organizations about how they can do so well and keep up with everything and, still finding that momentum and that drive? Any words of wisdom you can share with us?
Gosh, there was recently I saw something where I can't remember who said it, and in fact I posted a link to this website on in our latest newsletter. It's niche.com, nitch.com. I found this saying on there, but it was something like if you already know. Well, let's see, what was it? Oh gosh, I can't remember exactly how it went. But basically, if you already know, if it feels like, if you're not struggling with the path that you're on, then somebody's already been on that path. And for me with TLDC, I struggle with it, it's like late nights and and committing myself to humans that I've never met and trying to maintain this whole thing as a one-man show. It is a struggle, but I am able to continue doing it. And I do, wake up in the morning, look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, you are probably going to be helping people today. There are people that are going to be able to utilize the resources that you're creating, and it's going to help them. I do see, people do buy memberships for TLDC, and that helps keep the light on, all of that, and I love it. But more than anything, I think it's for my own. Just for my personality or who I am, just the fact that I'm doing this to help others is just, that's why I keep on doing it, because I know it's something unique, it's different, and there are people that still need it. I feel like the world is a pretty selfish place altogether now, and, and for me to offset that and for me to try to maintain a world that my son will want to live in, I need to do something like this. I need to keep something like TLDC alive. And it stuff will shift, right? I want to do live events again. I want to generate revenue. I want to find a business model where this thing won't be any kind of strain on me whatsoever, and that it can actually employ other people and help them with with their lifestyles and careers. But for, at a really, really basic level, and as a one-man show, I find like, what can I do to keep this going and still help people and not have it be like terrible on my life? And that's where I'm at. And I don't feel like I really answered your question, because I don't know if you're looking for a tool or something. I can't tell you. I think we've talked about this before, but ChatGPT has it's probably saved me about 10 hours a week. So that's one thing that I know that's helped a ton. But more than anything, as a one-man show, you just really have to figure out, like, why the heck are you doing this? And it's got to align with, I guess, your soul. And I don't know, that might sound a little weird, but that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's not cheesy or anything to me. Yeah. Makes sense. Hey, positivity, do what you love. That's what I gathered from it. There's going to clearly be bumps and bruises along the way, but it sounds like you love what you're doing and you're making an impact because you are. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Well, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your words of wisdom and talking about TLDC, community building, and all of this good stuff. Where can people go to learn more about you, TLDC, and everything else?
Yeah, so TLDC is at thetldc.com. You can go there. There are bunch of free, you can watch all the interviews that we do. There's lots of stuff there at thetldc.com. Most of it is it's all media. If you want to find more about me, I do a bunch of different stuff, but Luis Malbas, LuisMalbas.com. There's, I play music, I do TLDC, I don't know what else I do. There's some stuff on there, some links you can check out. I have like an album out from years ago that you can still find on Spotify and places like that. But yeah, LuisMalbas.com.
I was just going to say, go see your band if you're in California.
Go see my band
obviously.
in California. Yeah, or my bands. I'm in a couple, but yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, man, once again, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Luke, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have not yet already done so, be sure to go and connect with Luis. Follow along with TLDC. I would highly encourage you to join that organization as well. A fantastic community, welcoming, supporting people, and everything that Luis really has created over the years has been absolutely fantastic. I cannot recommend that enough. So be sure to follow along with him and, of course, with TLDC. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, give it a 5-star rating wherever you are listening, for Apple Podcasts or for, I was actually going to say Stitcher, but I was told that Stitcher isn't a thing anymore. So whether you're listening on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, comment along and talk about what you enjoyed with this latest podcast episode. It's so great to be able to hear from all of you who listen to this show. So be sure to leave it a rating where you can, and of course to comment along and talk about what was your biggest takeaway from this episode. Once again, be sure to let me know about your thoughts of the instructional design database and with the whole community product idea. Would love to hear more from you. Once again, I'm throwing out that bat signal. I need your help. I want to be able to really make this the very best that it can for our community. We have an awesome learning nerd community. Speaking about community, the entire theme of this podcast, we have a fantastic learning nerd community. So if I can bring more of you together to connect with one another and to build content around that to support you, by all means, I'm going to do so. Also, if you want to be able to really take your instructional design skills to that next level, our new cohort for Instructional Design Institute, starting up again August 28th. Be sure to apply. I love teaching. I love seeing the transformations about what people go through within week 1 to week 7. It's truly mind-blowing to see how much you can learn within only 49 days, if you actually think about it like that. So if you want to be able to go through that transformation yourself, then by all means, apply today. Can't wait to see you inside of our class. But that, my learning nerds, that's all I have for you today. So, of course, stay nerdy out there. Talk to you next time.